Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. It's natural to seek guidance from those who have walked a similar path before us. After all, who better to understand our struggles than someone who has been there themselves? But what happens when the advice we receive isn't necessarily what's best for us? How do we know which advice we should be following and when we should consider alternative advice from someone else? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. One of the beautiful aspects of recovery is the sense of community and support that it gives us. We lean on each other, share our experiences, and offer advice and guidance to those who are struggling. However, there's a fine line between helpful guidance and blindly following advice without question. But when I first got sober, I did not know that. I knew nothing about how to get sober, how to stay sober. Hell, I didn't even know how to go to the grocery store and not go down the liquor aisle. So when I decided to quit drinking this last time, the only thing I knew to try was to go to rehab. Then when it was time to leave rehab, they said go to AA, so that's what I did. Then when I got to AA, the message that was being spoken in the meetings were very clear. If I wanted to stay sober, I had to do what they told me. In fact, in my first meeting, one of the old-timers who was sharing looked at me since I raised my hand earlier as a newcomer and said, "Take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, because you know nothing about staying sober, so we don't want to hear anything you have to say." Although I thought the delivery of his message was a little rude, I thought to myself, he was right. I know nothing about sobriety. So I began my journey of pretty much following the blind advice of old-timers in the room. The longer you get sober and begin to heal, though, you start to get back into touch with your intuition. Some of the things I was being directed to do did not sit right with me. I began to ask questions about parts of the program and fellowship that didn't feel right. First thing I brought up was the fact that the Big Book instructs you that you must clear all your wreckage, but specifically says you probably shouldn't tell your wife if you've been unfaithful. I had been sober a couple of years at this point, and I knew several men who were still carrying around the guilt of past infidelity because they were following the direction of the Big Book. Having studied a lot of AA history because I was so fascinated with the program, I discovered one of the founders, Bill Wilson, was notorious for cheating on his wife, both before and after he got sober. I asked a few old-timers if that part of the Big Book might have been motivated by Bill Wilson's infidelity and not wanting to admit it to his wife Lois. It felt like it contradicted the advice given in the rest of the book, and I questioned whether it was doing more harm than good. I also questioned the part of the book that says you must find your part in the situation when it comes to harms done to you. The examples given in the book, I could see how that could apply. It involves a guy's wife, boss, and coworker. But most people I know who struggle with addiction have resentments that make those examples look pretty petty. In any given AA meeting, you're almost certain to have people who have experienced extreme neglect and abuse in their childhoods. However, in good conscience, can we tell someone who has a resentment about being sexually abused as a child to find their part in it? When I questioned this, I was told that it was my alcoholism speaking. It wanted to get me drunk, and the fastest path to relapse was not following the directions in the Big Book. I asked why people with very different background and experiences from the men who wrote the Big Book should blindly follow advice that may not apply to their situations. I was told I had a case of terminal uniqueness. People who think they are different are just finding excuses not to follow directions laid out in the Big Book. So I kept blindly following the advice I was given. I'm not saying that I did not get some very good guidance and advice from my time in AA, but every time I listened to advice that contradicted what my heart was telling me was right, I distanced myself further from reconnecting with my intuition. And after 4 years of doing this, I realized I was not living my best sober life. I was living the idea of what sobriety was supposed to look like based on others' opinions and their experiences. Yes, I was sober, but I was still lost. I kept going to meetings, but started ignoring parts of the program that I didn't agree with. I encouraged men I sponsored to also lean more into their own intuition instead of blindly following advice. I encouraged them to ask why if the advice they were given didn't make sense to them. I also told them to throw away the cotton and speak up when something didn't feel right. If you have any experience in AA, I'm sure you could guess that my new method of recovery and sponsorship did not go over well at all. I even had one old-timer tell me, despite how well the guys I was sponsoring were doing, that my advice was going to kill them because some of it contradicted the big book or the generally accepted rules that are passed down in AA. Now, in retrospect, I should have not kept sponsoring guys who came to AA if I was not going to teach the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If the program was not right for me, rather than trying to go rogue, I should have just left then. AA is very clear in its message. If you want what we have, you have to do what we do. Today, I recognize that AA works for a lot of people. It just was not working for me. After about a year of still going to AA, I realized I didn't want what they had. It wasn't that I felt that what I wanted was better than what they were doing. It just was different. And that is okay. And although I was confident in my decision, I had absolutely no clue what I was going to do. But for the first time since getting sober, I was allowing my heart to have the loudest voice in the room. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I was confident that I was going to be fine. So what have I learned since making that decision, and what has my recovery journey looked like since? Since this podcast is about recovery, I will often refer to my life after getting sober as my recovery journey, but it is more of a life journey where I no longer drink. I know that to achieve what I want from my life and to become the person I want to be, I absolutely cannot drink. But most of what I work on today has nothing to do with not drinking. It is about facing my struggles, healing and growing, and working on becoming the person that I want to be. I will share some of the lessons I've learned in that journey. The first lesson I learned is to quit blindly following the advice that I'm given. Blindly following advice could lead us down a dangerous path. It could cause us to ignore our own instincts and intuition, ultimately hindering our progress in recovery. We may find ourselves trying to fit into someone else's mold rather than embracing our own journey. One of the best ways to do this is to seek out advice from multiple people. When I'm struggling with something, I look for people who seem like they have experience in that area and can give relevant advice. So if I'm struggling financially, I look to friends who seem to be financially responsible. If I'm struggling with dating, I look to my friends who are in happy relationships themselves. Something I've been doing more lately is seeking out people who I know have varying opinions and beliefs than I do and being open to new ideas. Most of us have friends that we know we could go to that will agree with our opinions on something. I also have friends that I know will co-sign most of my bullshit and tell me I'm not doing anything wrong when my intuition is telling me differently. I also know I have friends who will tell me the truth even when it might not feel good. If I want to change and do better in my life, I need to be open to honest advice, even if it might challenge my current beliefs. Now you might be thinking, I don't know anybody that has experience in the area that I'm struggling with. That is okay. There are many times that I'm in that same spot. That is when I ask people I know if they know anybody. My circle of people to go to for advice was very small when I started. But as I continue to seek out people, that circle has grown and continues to grow today. I may not have a go-to person for every challenge I face, but today I know that the chances are good that if I don't know someone in my circle could point me in the right direction. So now that we have advice from multiple people, how do we know which of that advice to take? This is where it's essential to listen to our intuition. Deep down, we often know what's best for us. If something doesn't feel right, it's okay to question it. What I usually do is look at all the advice I was given and see how well it applies to my situation. Sometimes it might be something I could navigate in my head, but for bigger decisions, I find it essential to write things out. It might be a pros and cons list, or it might end up looking like a journal entry. I look at all aspects of each one, and once I feel like I've given everything proper consideration, I sit quietly and ask myself what feels right. not what my head is trying to convince me, because my head often lives in a state of fear and is just trying to convince me not to do anything uncomfortable, even if it's best for me. I try to push the head noise out for just long enough that I could hear my heart. And the second that my heart speaks to me, I listen. And then at that moment, I take action. Here's the thing when doing this. We won't know if it's right until we try it. I have taken advice that I was certain would work out perfectly, but failed miserably. I've also taken advice that I thought there was no way in hell this is going to work, that ended up being some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. There's no way to avoid mistakes in this process, so it's best to just accept that. Life is about trying things, learning from experiences, and then trying again with the knowledge from those past experiences. We didn't learn to walk by watching other kids walk. We learn by trying, falling, trying again, falling again, and then finally walking across the room and thinking we finally figured out this walking thing, only to fall on our ass once again. Remember, it is okay to make mistakes. Recovery is a learning process, and we're bound to stumble along the way. What's important is that we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep moving forward. But here's the beauty in that process. In all those bumps and bruises that we get along the way as we learn our own recovery journey, we will learn to connect with our hearts again. And as that connection grows, we will learn to trust our ability to navigate this journey of life. And when we are on our journey, not the one that's laid out for us, we will become more authentic to ourselves. It is a process, and I'm still discovering things about myself today. But I was only able to do that when I became willing to seek out my own path. There are many mistakes, bumps, bruises, and some heartache along the way, but the rewards I get today outweigh every challenge I have faced along this journey. There's nothing better than living your life authentically rather than one that has been designed for you. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. This week, I want you to think of one person that you think will benefit from listening to this episode and send it to them. Be the person who plants a positive seed in someone else's life. You never know how much it could impact them. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and keep living sober and happy.